Brazil, tropical and historic, home to scenic beaches and some of the greatest race car drivers in history. Today, the Kart FedEx Championship Series invades Rio de Janeiro. Brazilian drivers give the Champ Car Series a unique international flavor. Brazilian Tony Kanaan nearly won Long Beach, leading 44 laps, while fellow countryman Helio Castroneves battled wheel-to-wheel with Juan Montoya for the lead at Nazareth. Their goal is to repeat Brazilian André Ribeiro's performance in Rio in 1996. But the American contingent, led by Michael Andretti, P.J. Jones, and Jimmy Vasser, is not here to see the sights. The only thing in their sights is the checkered flag. Brazil is a country of incredible natural beauty and an intense love for motorsports. Today, it's the Kart Rio 200. Hello and welcome. I'm Paul Page. You know, one of the things that makes the Kart Series unique is the wide variety of circuits that they race. A month ago, they were in the twisty streets of Long Beach, California. Today, they're in Rio on a super speedway. Well, it's an oval, but it's really D-shaped, with the long side of the D, the front straightaway. Now that means, Parker, that these drivers are going to slam down through the gears, stand on the brakes, and slow from 215 miles an hour down to about 110 and a little under 400 feet.
And you're right, Paul, this circuit is unique. It combines all the greatest features of a super speedway for passing. The long straightaways allow lots of drafting with the best opportunities of passing on a road course, hard braking into relatively low-speed corners. And it's this combination of features that set up Greg Moore's great pass of Alex Zanardi last year, not only for the lead, but also for the Rio win.
And here, too, we have an incredibly popular pole sitter. First time, here's Gary Gerould.
Paul, for the third consecutive race, we have a first-time ever career pole winner. And in this instance, it turns out to be one of the favorite sons of Brazil, Christian Fittipaldi. He won the pole by a mere 100th of a second over Dario Franchitti. And when it was confirmed, it touched off a jubilant celebration here on pit road. Now, Christian has never won in his championship career. He's been on the podium 7 times. Can you imagine what it would be like if he was to win the Rio 200? Let's check in now with Jan Bikas.
Well, Gary, at Rio, there's so many great opportunities to pass, it doesn't really matter how well you qualify. Well, that's great defending champion Greg Moore. Yesterday in qualifying, he wasn't happy with the balance of the race car, so therefore he only qualified in 10th spot. But this morning, the crew was able to fix the car, make it to Greg Moore's liking. He was the fastest man on the racetrack. Now, the guy who was third, a former winner of this race, Paul Tracy, also had problems on Friday. He crashed, went to the backup car, and therefore he is starting in 12th spot. Ran fast, as I said, this morning. So 2 former winners of this race starting 10th and 12th. That first corner should be awesome.
Here's the way they qualified. On the pole, Christian Fittipaldi. He broke the track record by nearly half a second for his first career pole. Alongside is Dario Franchitti. In the second row, Juan Montoya, the winner of the last 2 races, and Gil DeFerrin. Row number 3, Brian Herta, and the 96 kart champion, Jimmy Vasser. The fourth row, Tony Kanaan, and Tarso Marquez driving the second Team Penske car in this his home country. The fifth row, Patrick Carpentier, and Greg Moore, last year's winner. Row 6, Helio Castroneves, and the 97 winner here at Rio, Paul Tracy. In row 7, Max Papis and Cristiano D'Amata. In the 8th row, Michael Andretti and P.J. Jones. Row 9, Adrian Fernandez and Richie Hearn. The 10th row, 2-time kart champion Al Unser Jr. and Scott Pruitt. The 11th row, Walter Salles driving for Tony Bettenhausen's team and Alex Barron. Row 12, Roberto Moreno subbing for Mark Blundell, injured in a test accident a week ago, and Michel Jourdain Jr. Row 13, Mauricio Gugelmin and Robbie Gordon. And the 14th row, Luis Garcia Jr. The top 7 qualifiers all broke last year's track record. So the field has started their engines, they're rolling, and we'll be back with the green flag right after this. Welcome back to Rio. Christian Fittipaldi, the pole sitter, 108 laps here. And the crews, of course, know 36 laps the key if you're going to make it a 2-stop race to hit the pits. And they are all factoring that the weather is threatening here. Now, Parker, let's take a look at the onboards.
Well, today, Paul, we'll be on board with the Toyota Swift of Richie Hearn. This is the view from P.J. Jones' car. His last race at Nazareth, he finished second, his best effort in Champ Cars today. We'll also be along with Michael Andretti. He's currently fourth in the championship, looking to move up during this race to challenge with his teammate. Here's the onboard of Tony Kanaan. He was a Long Beach pole winner. He's qualified 7th. He's also looking for a strong race in his native country of Brazil. And here's a view from the Renard Honda of the 96 Series champ, Jimmy Vasser.
Well, plenty of onboards to watch. And the key to this track, of course, is as they rocket down into the first turn on the first lap. Christian Fittipaldi was saying, you know, I hope they all stay a little bit back off me as we take that green flag. Dario Franchitti starts alongside. They begin to form in the rows.
And, Paul, the strategy is, can you run low downforce or high downforce? Christian's low, Dario's high. Dario's great on cold tires. We'll see if you can get around him heading down into the first corner.
You can imagine the emotion that Christian Fittipaldi feels now, bringing the field to the green flag as the pole sitter for the first time in his career. They wave it off. They wave that start off. And that's going to create a little confusion as they head down into turn 1, but everybody gets slowed up without any problem whatsoever. Of course, there was some official worry about the start itself and making sure that they came off the corner neatly with plenty of spacing.
Christian Fittipaldi and Juan Montoya got a great start on the inside there, Paul. Dario got a little bit behind coming off the final corner. Jim Swintel, the starter, didn't like the alignment. He waved the yellow. As I said just before that start, or the abandoned start there, is that some of the cars are running high downforce, most of the field. But through the field, we've got low downforce runners like Christian Fittipaldi. Looking a little farther back, we've got Brian Herta, the Penske cars. If they can get through the first few corners, they'll be able to get away cleanly going down the straightaway. So Juan Montoya and Dario Franchitti are going to have to depend on that high downforce, the ability that they have to run very, very quickly on cold tires to their advantage if they're going to get around Christian Fittipaldi.
So Christian now brings the field around without the aid of the pace car, and they will come back taking a look at the green flag again. Assuming, of course, that the alignment is good. They're still pretty close, back about the 4th and 5th row. This time we go green. Actually, the conclusion of the first lap, they charge for that first turn. Oh, look at Montoya as he comes down on the inside, takes the lead away from Fittipaldi. Franchitti goes into 3rd.
That's exactly what I was talking about, Paul, as Juan Montoya is very, very good at getting the most out of the car right away on cold tires. He's running more downforce. He used that to his advantage, and now he's starting to pull away as the rest of the field's backing up behind the low downforce configuration of Christian Fittipaldi.
Montoya pulls away. Here is the battle. Tony Kanaan now trying to move on Gil de Ferran. And look at Montoya. It's goodbye once he jumped into the lead. Tony Kanaan right behind de Ferran. You look back from Kanaan to Jimmy Vasser. And now on board with Jimmy. You look forward. Notice the skies. That's the direction the weather tends to come from, and it is dark there. Vasser on the front stretch. Tony Kanaan still taking a look forward. That's where the fight is now, de Ferran and Kanaan. Hope at some time here we'll be able to give you an idea of how they slam down through the gears into that first turn. They do it going into 4 as well.
Paul, they're carrying about 215 miles an hour off the pit straightaway down into turn 1, hard on the brakes. Some of the drivers have set their cars up with a 5-speed gearbox. They only go down 2 gears. Some of the drivers are using a 6-speed configuration, shifting from 6th down to 3rd gear.
for the most part, they have strung out. We're going to go back and take a look at the start. Actually, the beginning of lap number 2 because of the 1 lap under yellow.
You can see him crowding the inside, trying to get an advantage. Christian thinks he's got it covered. Juan Montoya continuing down the inside, outbreaks him. A great bit of driving there. The rest of the field slotting in behind Christian Fittipaldi.
Gil de Ferran still trying to hold off Tony Kanaan. Jan Beekes?
Yes, and remember, Paul, he is on Goodyear tires, and Goodyear last year, when they came here, thought they had plenty of grip, but they weren't happy with the wear. Now, Firestone, on the other hand, they came here last year, said they had great wear, but not enough grip. So each company took a different approach, and right now, they seem pretty evenly matched.
Franchitti working on Christian Fittipaldi. Look at the lead that Montoya has been able to pull out just in the first 5 laps of this run. Couple of people moving. Brian Herta started 5th, fell back to 12th. And Greg Moore started 10th, is up to 7th. Continuing on that battle for second place. You'll notice as we run through the order, 2 Penske cars in the field. The team that started the season saying we'll go with 1, and it'll be Al Unser Jr. Then the accident at Miami. Now you have 2 cars in the field, and they do seem to be gaining from the benefit of the additional data that's become available to them.
Tarso Marquez ran very strongly in the opening sessions, bringing the whole Penske team up a little more than they've seen prior this year. Here we see Tarso running down the back straightaway, making some improvements this weekend.
Roger Penske says he will be in that car. Marquez will be selected races throughout this year.
Shadowing Paul Tracy down that long pit straightaway, Paul.
Montoya, Fittipaldi, Franchitti, de Ferran, Kanaan, the top of the field. Now keeping an eye on P.J. Jones. Take a look for his onboard camera. He's moving up in the field, up 4 positions thus far.
Through turn 3, hard on the brakes here, Paul, from 210 miles an hour down to about 115. Pulling 3 Gs through this corner, hard on the throttle. See him reach down, grab 4th gear, 5th gear. There's 6th.
PJ runs in 12th. That's Max Pappas just ahead.
And you can see the difference in the downforce configurations there, Paul. Max Pappas running a low downforce configuration. PJ running a high downforce configuration. He was able to pull up there a little bit, coming down through turn numbers 1, and now you can see Max start to extend his lead on PJ just a little bit as they head through corners 2 and 3. Back on the brakes, coming into turn 4.
Now keep an eye on the comparison between the way PJ just ran from the onboard cameras and when you see some of the others, because PJ has looked much more stable than some of the other cars have at speed. There's Greg Moore, now up to 7th place. So this whole game of driver courage, aided by tires and downforce. Jan Beekes?
Yes, and when you're talking about those downforce levels, don't forget that a low downforce setup works pretty good when your tires are new, but it does not work as well when you start to get some wear on them. So the guys that are performing well with that heavier or higher downforce that Parker's talking about, as the race progresses, they'll go even better.
Montoya, Fittipaldi, Franchitti. Then Gil de Ferran and Tony Kanaan. That battle is stabilized for the moment. You're on board with Kanaan. You can see that de Ferran is well ahead on the racetrack. So the first laps are complete. 10 are already into the record book. 108 the scheduled distance. We'll be back with more from Rio. Back at Rio, no change in the top 10. Montoya, who jumped into the lead at the start of the second lap. First lap was run under yellow and has not relinquished that position, though it now seems that Christian Fittipaldi is able to nibble away ever so slowly on the lead of Juan Montoya. Gary Gerald?
Well, there's concern in the Dario Franchitti camp. He continues to run solidly in third place, it appears. They thought they had a radio transmission where he said he felt something was broken. They're not sure what it is. Somebody indicated he may have said fifth gear. They're still trying to sort it out down here. A lot of conversations. Kim Green, Don Halliday, and company. Franchitti, meanwhile, running strongly in third place.
Well, we'll watch the interval for you. He's 2.7 seconds behind the leader. There he is. And he actually closes a bit on that last lap.
Well, right now, Paul, there are only 3 or 4 cars running in the 39-second range, and that's Montoya, Fittipaldi, Franchitti, and occasionally DeFerrin. Everyone else is back in the 40 and 41-second range. So if there's a problem with Dario's car, it's not apparent from the lap times he's currently turning.
Battle at the front begins to close in. Fittipaldi is a second and a half behind the leader, Juan Montoya. The Chip Ganassi car out in front has become a familiar figure this season. Jimmy Vasser, his teammate, currently runs in 6th place, 7 seconds behind the lead. Track here in Rio is we mentioned a large D, and that means that the first turn is absolutely critical. They slam down, jump all over the brakes. Brakes are critical here. Same thing occurs as they head into turn 4. A lot of deceleration, but when you look at the individual drivers' charts, it's amazing at how fast they are capable of slowing the champ car.
These cars really slow down quick, Paul, and everybody here loves this track. It's wide, it's a little bumpy, but it has plenty of opportunities for drafting and trying to figure out that strategy, as well as really sucking it up and trying to get under someone under braking. The corners are slow enough so that the aerodynamic buffeting, the turbulence that drivers normally experience on a super speedway, just isn't there because they're only around 115, 120 miles an hour. So they can get right up behind the car in front of them if they can make that move under braking for both turns 1 and 4. So all around, all the drivers think that this combination of super speedway road course is by far one of the best configurations in just sheer terms of safety and racing.
You got a glimpse there, and we have from time to time, of Marquez with Paul Tracy just ahead of him. It's a battle for 9th. Tracy was able to move on Marquez just about a lap and a half ago.
And you can see, Paul, they're swinging wide to the right of our screen. The reason they're doing that is trying to avoid some of the bigger bumps under the bridge on the back straightaway. But the drivers have told me that this track is so easy to drive through turns 2 and 3 flat, they could place the car just about anywhere. So they're trying to find the place where they can run the car absolutely as low as possible without bottoming. In order to do that, they've got to run down the inside of the track going around the back straightaway.
Montoya, Fittipaldi, Franchitti, they flash across the line, completing the 17th lap. 1.1 seconds. So again, Fittipaldi nibbling away at Montoya. And you can also see that very soon traffic will become a factor here. That's part of it. Luis Garcia is the first car at the back of the field that they're going to encounter.
See Juan Montoya moving over now. This isn't to avoid bumps, Paul. He's trying to pick up the draft of Luis Garcia Jr. You can see Christian Fittipaldi doing exactly the same thing as is Dario Franchitti, trying to maximize that straight line speed as they head down into turn 1.
In the race where we waved off on the start, ran the first lap under yellow. We've been clean since then. 18 are now complete. 90 to go, and the leader now begins to work on traffic. There's Fittipaldi running in second. Now under a second behind.
We're at the point, Paul, where they've burned about half of their fuel load. The true character of the car will start to come out as to whether they're happy with the way the car balance is currently or whether they're going to start talking about changes at this point. And so what will happen is we should see some cars starting to move forward, some other cars falling back at this halfway point of their fuel run.
Well, interesting at the line. Of course, the first two, Montoya and Fittipaldi, were approaching traffic. Montoya was actually handling it on the last lap, getting around Garcia, but that allowed Franchitti to come through as the fastest. So we'll do it again next lap and see how the relative times come out.
And on lap times, Paul, that last lap, Paul Tracy was the fastest person on the track. So what we're seeing, as I just said a little while ago, some of the drivers' cars are starting to come more to their liking as others are starting to go off. And Paul consistently now is one of the fastest cars on the track as he starts to handle up Patrick Carpentier directly in front of him.
And Parker, just a couple of laps ago, Paul Tracy was complaining on the radio that he felt like he was very slow on this long 3,500-foot front straightaway. Jan?
Well, talking about slow on the straightaway, we've talked about the Penske chassis and Tarso Marquez. Remember that Penske has bought a Lola chassis. Well, where is the Lola? That's Helio Castro Neves. It turns out that in this particular downforce configuration, the thing just does not run down the straightaway as much as 15 miles an hour down. So I think Penske is really glad they didn't bring that car, at least to this race.
We take you back to 12th place now because P.J. Jones is closing on Max Pappas.
You can see him working through here, Paul, and as you said earlier, this car is very, very stable. Looks like it's on railroad tracks coming through the corners. And it looked like he just passed one of the Targa cars, Paul, as he came through turn 2. Looks like they had a problem down on the inside. We're looking for it.
We're trying to figure out exactly what that was as we stay with PJ. No change in the course condition.
I'll stick my neck out, Paul, but I think it was Jimmy Vasser.
It was
slowing
Jimmy
down
Vasser
on the back straightaway.
And there is Jimmy Vasser on board into the pits. You caught it. Just suddenly seemed to drop off, almost like it might have been an engine problem. So Jimmy Vasser rolls to a stop. The target team is there.
To have something that dramatic happen to slow him down that fast on the back straightaway, just put fuel in his tires, very unusual, Paul.
They're checking the pop-off valve connector, pointing toward a rear tire. They've changed tires, got a hot problem somewhere around the left rear. They've thrown water on it repeatedly. Car still sets here. Now they're motioning Vasser back out.
Boy, that was fascinating. The refueling to change the tires you would do anyway. Then the focus at the pop-off valve section at the top of the rear cowling of the car. Boy, that's fascinating. What it does, though, of course, is put Jimmy Vasser in trouble fairly early on and drops him down to 26th starting position.
Paul, it's apparently a boost pressure problem. They're trying to correct it and work on it.
So Jimmy Vasser's without any boost, and he doesn't have any horsepower, and without horsepower, no speed. We'll keep an eye on him. His teammate, Juan Montoya, still in front. We'll be back after this message and a word from our ABC stations. Paul Page with Parker Johnstone back at Rio. Jimmy Vasser back into the pits. There are some changes occurring in the bottom half of the top 10. Montoya, Fittipaldi, Franchitti, the top 3, followed by DeFerrin and Tony Kanaan. But then Carpentier is up there. Paul Tracy is in 7th. Greg Moore is 8th. Max Pappas 9th. And Tarso Marquez sits in 10th place, back on board with P.J. Jones. That's Marquez just ahead of him. Whoa.
You can see he's working a little harder than the last time we were on board with PJ. He's right up behind the back of that Penske, looking for a draft, seeing if he can pop out and outbreak him going into turn 1.
Down into that turn 1, no change in the closure. Little bit, oh boy, PJ.
He's working now, Paul. We didn't see that earlier, but he's definitely trying to make up some time coming off of turns 1 and 4, trying to get a run on Tarso, so he can be right behind him using that draft. But now he's got slower traffic with the Luis Garcia Jr. Handles him up right down the inside of turn 4.
Watching too, you saw a little moisture on the lens. We clear it now, but you know, sometimes that comes from the car in front of you. It's just moisture from the exhaust and other fluids. You want to make sure it's not rain. It is still threatening here. Alex Barron pitted the Dan Gurney Eagle on the 24th lap, routine. Going back to the front of the field, Montoya, Fittipaldi. Here comes Franchitti. Fittipaldi's working on him. There's no question about it. Pit stop should come theoretically in at least 8 laps, perhaps a little longer. Serious trouble here, though.
Well, we didn't think that 4 tires and full fuel would fix this, Paul, and in fact it didn't. They're back in trying to figure out what's wrong, either with the hardware or the engine management software of that car.
Parker, they're basically tracking through all of those components. You can see the side pods had come off, and they've gone through there. They don't know if it's electronics. They don't know if it's boost related. They just know they've got a problem. And now the steering wheel pops out. Looks like Jimmy Vasser's day at the office is over very early. Oh, and is he frustrated?
It's interesting the way Jimmy approaches it as well. He just climbed out of the only private space that he feels he has. He says the cockpit is his. He decorates it the way he wants. And indeed, there is some decoration. Jimmy is out early and obviously not at all happy with it. Yellow flag comes out. It may in fact have been a couple of things here. Michael Andretti slowed on the racetrack, but you also see the yellow and red striped course condition flag, which can be an indication of almost anything on the surface. Our worry would be rain.
Paul, we watched Jimmy Vasser climb out of his car. Here's his teammate Juan Montoya, and you've got to, you know, it's hard for me to remember the last time that we saw a mechanical failure on one of the Target Chip Ganassi cars. One of the things that has gotten them to the championship consistently the last 3 years has been reliability. And now we see Michael Andretti climbing out of his Kmart Haviland Newman Haas car.
Well, a couple of interesting developments, and that, in fact, you're dead on. That's the first mechanical for Jimmy Vasser since the 1997 Michigan 500. Those cars are generally just as perfect as they come. Michael Andretti out, they have the oil dry, so that begins to look like an engine. We send you back down to the pits.
Well, Christian Fittipaldi, you could see, was starting to challenge Juan Montoya, and even so, he says he has a bit of a push with the chassis. They are going to come in, they are going to make a pit stop. Obviously, they think that this will be within the fuel window to get them to the end, but the main thing is they want to get some of the push out of the car, which we would assume would be a slight front wing change.
Now, the first real yellow of the day, Jan Bikus, while we still have you, we did see the course condition flag. Now that we've seen Michael, we assume that that's for whatever was leaking out from under Michael's car. Any indication of rain?
No, at the moment it is certainly dry, and there's an indication of rain by looking at the clouds, but thankfully they're not overhead near us at the moment.
Jan, we love you. Keep that kind of information coming.
We're going to take a look at a replay here, Paul.
Let us know what happened to Michael Andretti. And we're going to hold off because here they come for their pit stops. This is the 30th lap as the leaders head in. Jan Bikus.
Christian Fittipaldi brings it in, and of course we're going to look to see if they decide to make a front wing change. They will not need all the fuel. This should be pretty quick. They didn't go for the wings. They must have done it. Let's get to Gary Gerould. That one's about 11.
Juan Montoya holding, waiting for fuel. He's rolling 10.5 seconds. A beautifully executed stop. He's out ahead of Franchitti. He's out ahead of Fittipaldi and Kanaan.
Gary, there is a problem for Mauricio Gugelmin. He was not able to get into a spot because he was in the way, or I should say Christian was pulling out when he arrived. So he's lost a lot of time down here on pit road.
The key on that exchange of stops, though, happened in second place. Franchitti picked up a position.
We also saw Tony Kanaan come up from 9th place to 4th place. Great work by that crew to pick up those positions in the pit lane. And before we had that yellow, Paul, the 2 fastest cars on the racetrack, they were exchanging quickest laps, were Dario Franchitti and Christian Fittipaldi. So it'll be interesting to see if that correction with Montoya's car will get him back at the top of the speed charts. And also, Paul Tracy continues to turn consistently quick laps.
And P.J. Jones moved from 11th to 6th on those as they try to get Michael's car off of the track. And we are under our first yellow of the day. The stops occurred on the 30th lap of 108. Our Toyota Spotlight focuses on the great Emerson Fittipaldi. Today's race is at the Fittipaldi Speedway. Emerson, a native of Brazil, is now the promoter for the Rio event, but a former 2-time Formula One champion who solidified his legendary status by winning 2 Indy 500s. Emo competed for 13 seasons on the kart circuit. He won 22 times and also captured the season championship in 1989. His final kart victory came at Nazareth in 1995. And of course, in just 2 weeks, these cars are back in the United States and right in the middle of America. The Motorola 300 kart action, May 29th, live coverage. We'll see how Juan Montoya fares. He leads it here today. Can he put this one in the record book and then add to it? Now, a problem occurring at the same time this caution came out is this. Helio Castroneves takes his car over to the edge, and obviously it's got a problem in the engine compartment as well. We'll follow that and maybe speculate on several problems, but first, what about the other potential engine problem, and that was Jimmy Vasser. Here's Gary Gerould.
Jimmy Vasser, can you tell us what was the problem here? You just lose power?
A lot of power. I noticed that the boost was down to 29.9, which is pretty much atmospheric conditions, and so we don't know if we lost a turbo or a header or something, you know, has something to do with the boost system, but you know, the odds have been with me over time. We don't really have too many mechanical failures, so you know, the team has been doing a good job that way, but it's just frustrating. You know, we're getting off to such a slow start here, one thing after another, but you know, there's still 3/4 of the season left, and we just got to come back swinging.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I can't remember the last time when we've had to talk to you with a DNF like this, but hopefully better things are right around the corner.
Well, I hope so, but things are looking good, you know, with Juan driving a fantastic race and leading this thing. You know, things are still looking good for Target Team.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, thanks.
We're going to run you through a full field summary here, but Parker, we've seen what seem to be several engine failures.
Very unusual, Paul. These cars are normally so reliable both from the tire, the chassis, the engine compartment, and these crews are so good. The preparation is so outstanding. This is very, very rare. And I just want to comment, what a professional Jimmy Vasser is. You can't believe how disappointing it is for a racer to come out of a race with the car-winning potential that Jimmy Vasser has and yet be so polite, so professional. I mean, my hat's off to Jimmy. He's great on the track and off. But what we saw, Paul, before we go through that race summary, is the winners and losers. We've talked all year about the teamwork. These guys are so good. Passing on the track is very difficult. The winners in that round of stops, you talked about Dario Franchitti. He came in 3rd, went out 2nd. P.J. Jones came in 11th, went out 6th. Al Jr. in 16th and out 10th. The big losers, Jill came in 4th, went out 14th. Paul Tracy came in 7th position, went out in 21st, and then he came back in to visit the pits again for a problem that we haven't found out about yet.
And of course, we showed you Helio Castroneves. He's already back in the pits. Gary?
Helio, can you tell us what happened? We heard there was a report of fire with your car.
Yeah, it was unfortunate when we left the pit. The car was running okay. We were a little slow on the straight, but that's unfortunate. The weather, it's kind of difficult to set up the car. And when we left the pit, all of a sudden, the engine stopped. I thought something was in the gear or something like that, but it's not. And I saw in the back was fire, and I said, well, I better get out of here.
Yeah, indeed. I know it's tough in front of your all the family, friends, and everybody down here, but thankfully you're all right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go for the next one.
All right, let's check with Jan.
Well, Gary, in regards to what Parker just said, with Gilles de Ferran going down after that pit stop, the 14th spot, the reason the air jack receptacle would not connect, there was some sort of debris in the hose. They had it in the right place, it just wouldn't raise the car, and unfortunately now he has to work his way back through the field.
Coming back to green flag once again, Montoya. Franchitti, Fittipaldi, Kanaan, Carpentier, the first 5. We're back racing again in Rio. By the way, speaking of reliability, as we watch the field come through, that's Michael Andretti's first mechanical since Fontana in '97 as well.
You can see the train down the back straightaway, Paul. Everyone trying to swerve for those bumps, but staying in line relatively in order to pick up that draft. It's significant here. It can add 5, 6, 7 miles an hour, and they certainly don't want to lose the draft of the car in front of them.
Race control is reporting that they're going to penalize Paul Tracy for a pit violation on his last round to stop. Currently sits 21st, last car on the leader lap. This is Tracy responding to the black flag on the violation. And of course he will, in all likelihood, go that lap down as a result of this. Let's go to Jan.
Well, Michael has come back to the pits. We understand an engine blown. That's what happened.
Yeah. Disastrous weekend, ending up in smoke. You know, just nothing went right for us. We had a lot of problems yesterday. Qualified terribly, and car just being stuck back there in traffic wasn't running too well, so I guess it's going to blow. That's where he wanted to blow.
Well, this is a unique racetrack as far as what you use aerodynamically. Now you're going to St. Louis, a place I know you've tested. More comfortable there?
I hope so. You know, we ran pretty good there last year, and you know, we had a pretty good test there, learned a lot, so hopefully, you know, we'll be able to run as well as we did last year.
Okay, have a good run.
Thanks.
Here's a sight that Tony Kanaan has. Looking forward, that's Christian Fittipaldi just ahead. Franchitti is staying pretty well glued to Montoya. Remember Long Beach and how the two came back to green together several different times? And maybe Franchitti picked something up there. He's actually closed just slightly. That's Carpentier just behind.
Dario's very, very good on full tanks and cold tires, Paul, but we've seen Montoya all year long. He's figured out the super speedways, the short ovals, the street courses. He is absolutely phenomenal, and here he is leading yet another race, only 5 races into the season.
Tony Kanaan, of course, the pole sitter on the streets of Long Beach. This is part of the Forsythe team now, so in reality, that's a teammate coming up behind him there in the person of Carpentier. Forsythe buying the Steve Horn operation, but keeping it separate. They have the one team, players team operating out of Indianapolis, and the team that Tony Kanaan is part of, the former Horn team, well, that still sits over in Columbus, Ohio.
Tony was very, very strong right from the opening practice, ended up qualifying 7th. Paul, it was a little unusual this race weekend. You've got to remember that Rio, like Motegi and the street courses, are some of the few tracks that these teams don't get to test at. But because of the weather delays that we had, normally these drivers get 5 sessions between practice and qualifying and warm-up prior to the race. This weekend they only got 3, and it shuffled the order. Some of the guys that are a little farther back normally were right at the front, and it's very interesting to see how their race strategy and preparation will prove out during the course of this race.
Boy, look at the back end as it steps out on Montoya's car, the leader, a couple of times, and it just gives you an idea of how quick his hands must be to keep that car in line.
Nothing like the reflexes of a 23-year-old with absolute nerves of steel, Paul. This kid is driving this car very, very hard. You can see it as he comes off the corner, sliding it right to the wall.
Actually, Franchitti closed a 10th that last time around, and Christian Fittipaldi is staying there as well. Jan Bikas?
Well, Paul, when you were talking a moment ago about the 2 Forsythe teams and about how they obviously have the same ownership, but they're separate, well, when they separate them, they do not share the setup sheets. They are still responsible for their own setup. So if you have a race where one team is running very well, the other is struggling, they don't help each other when it comes to engineering. So it is totally separate, and because of that, they're highly competitive between the 2 teams. They love to try and beat each other.
That's an interesting addition, because you would think they take advantage of that broader database.
Well, there are some slight differences. Tony's got a Honda power plant, and obviously the players team has a Mercedes. The CGs are a little different, the power bands are a little different. That alone requires a different setup.
Montoya is still the leader, followed by Franchitti and Fittipaldi. Franchitti's remained in about the same position. This is the onboard down in the field, of course, of Ricky Hearn. Hearn runs 19th right now. So from Rio, the action continues. 43 laps are complete. Montoya is the leader. We'll be back. Back in Rio, nothing changes at the front of the field. Montoya, Franchitti, and Fittipaldi, except that Franchitti has nibbled away another 10th. He now is sitting 7/10ths behind the leader. The rest of the order remains the same. Back in the field, we've been keeping track of Roberto Moreno. Now, he is in the car that normally would be assigned to Mark Blundell, but he was involved in a major accident testing for the race in St. Louis, suffered a fractured vertebrae as a result. They put Moreno in the car. He is here, and he's doing a nice job with it.
He's doing a great job. He wasn't happy for the few practice sessions they had or qualifying. He started in 23rd place, but he's up to 15th now. He made a great pass going down the inside of Adrian Fernandez down into turn 1. He was almost in the grass, Paul. It was very, very inspired. Just a magnificent move.
The Penske car you saw, the yellow helmet, that's Tarso Marquez. He is now in 8th place and giving that car a good ride. His teammate, in the meantime, Al Unser Jr., has been up and down throughout the weekend as they struggle to get both of those cars working. There's Roberto Moreno.
you talked about Roberto Moreno, and checking with the crew, he's very happy with the car, and they decided to make no changes whatsoever on that last pit stop. He likes the way the car started, and he thinks it's going to be right where he wants it at the finish.
And he's flying through the field, Paul. He's got his sights set on Scott Pruitt now directly ahead of him, looking to the inside, using the draft to his advantage.
Gil de Ferran handled up Pruitt. Here comes Fernandez as well. Now Fernandez starts to work on Roberto Moreno.
Adrian Fernandez still driving that Frankenstein
Al
car.
Unser Jr. working on Marquez. So all of a sudden at the 48th lap, it seems like everybody's suddenly getting racy here. And once little Al got around Marquez, he's taken off. P.J. Jones up to 6th place now. Montoya, Franchitti, Fittipaldi, Kanaan, Carpentier, and P.J. Jones.
PJ coming off his best finish at Nazareth on the last race. His drive to second was truly inspired. And here we see him once again coming up through the field in 6th place, driving his Swift chassis extremely hard. I started to mention Adrian Fernandez still driving that 97, 98, 99 Renard. The Patrick Racing Sable still split.
Here's the fight for second as Christian Fittipaldi suddenly moves on Dario Franchitti. And the report from the observers is that Scott Pruitt had an engine blow as well. Here he is coming in. Certainly a display of vapor at the back of the car. Jan Beekes, this brings the yellow out.
Yes, and I don't know if it actually blew to pieces, Paul, because we heard it come down the front straightaway, and it just sounded sick. You know, something like maybe in the valve train or electronics, something like that. So certainly he's going to abandon it now because maybe it blew up after the fact. But tough run for the Toyota of Scott Pruitt. Let's go to Gary.
Gary Gerould.
We're going to take a look here at a situation where Juan Montoya has lost all of his tear-offs over his face shield. They have taped a tear-off here on the end of his stick. So the next time he comes into the pits, the idea will be he'll reach up and grab this, and the adhesive extending over the edge will stick to his helmet, hopefully, and it at least will give him a little bit protection on the face shield. And of course, it's not a problem as long as he's leading, but he gets in traffic, and there are still very dirty areas on this track where they kick up a lot of fine dust and gravel that can pit or damage the face shield. Visibility could become a problem if he doesn't get this properly in place.
Well, you know, we use a mechanism on the onboard camera that has a piece of clear celluloid that runs in front of the lens, and we just keep reeling it in. You have to clear that a couple times a lap. So is that indicative at all of what he may be facing without tear-offs?
Well, that's true, Paul. The sprint car drivers use a mechanism that's got a motor drive to move the tear-off shield across the visor. It's pretty bulky, pretty heavy. Champ car drivers don't use it. And as Gary said, as long as he's out front, it's not a problem until he catches lap traffic. Now, keep in mind, there's only one support race that runs here all year long. Kirk Russell and Wally Dallenbach, the chief steward and the technical director for CART, told us they dragged tires for days trying to get the silt, the sand, all the rocks off this racetrack. It is very dirty, especially offline, and as he goes through that lap traffic, it will absolutely destroy his field of vision unless he can get a tear-off from the crew and use that through his next pit stop.
Well, it's the Emerson Fittipaldi Speedway. It is not used all that much during the year, so it's obvious that you don't use it, you're going to have a buildup pretty quickly. So we are under caution, and Montoya is still the leader, followed by Fittipaldi and Franchitti. We'll be back after this message and a word from our ABC station. Spirit of the Americas, one of 7 Goodyear blimps in the world, based right here in Rio. And our coverage, of course, coming from the CART Rio 200, where Montoya has been the leader all of the way. And ABC Sports will bring you Sports Century, presented by General Motors. Greatest coaches, highlights and interviews with some of the greatest coaches of the century. Now let's go to Jan Beekes.
Well, we saw Scott Pruitt get out of his car a few moments ago. When he came by the front straightaway, Scott, it sounded sick, but by the time he got here, it looked like it was a much bigger problem.
It was. First, hi to my family at home. We think we picked up a puncture in the radiator. With all the debris on this track, we were fighting a little bit of overheating and just continued to get worse. We were holding on good. You know, we went from, I think, 21st to 13th. Tough day for Toyota, but and Pioneer and all the guys, they did a super job, and we'll be back at St. Louis running them hard.
Okay, thanks. We'll get up top.
They complete the 55th lap, making it a legal race. Green flag comes out again. Montoya is the leader. Fittipaldi there in second. Franchitti, then Kanaan, Carpentier.
year long, Paul, Montoya is brilliant on restarts. We saw him snooker Franchitti at Long Beach. He's done it again to Christian Fittipaldi here. He's very, very good at doing the bob and weave just before he launches, catches everybody not quite ready, and is able to pull out a gap, which gives him a clean couple of laps. From there, he can extend, and that's exactly what he's doing.
And how long is he going to continue to get away with it? SBT Brazil, our podcaster, giving you all the coverage here. Kind of interesting. I suggested that they love their racing, and they do. And from time to time, we can hear the host broadcasters who are in the booth next door clearly through the door.
Hey, Paul, these guys get excited when the wind changes direction. They are huge race fans.
Montoya again is able to pull away. It's another great start. Tony Kanaan, 4th place. Franchitti ahead, that's Carpentier sitting just behind him. Allenser Jr. was in and out of the pit, so that car, the Penske car that you see back in the order, is the number 3 of Marquez. Montoya still unchallenged. Carpentier. Now begins to close just a bit. Blue car is Carpentier, and P.J. Jones behind him, then Pappas. Comes Marquez with Greg Moore behind him, the defending champion for this race.
And Paul, what's interesting is not only the strategy of trying to decide whether to run the high or low downforce, as we see the Penske's in low downforce form. If you can see the rear wing, it's almost absolutely flat. The players' cars, the wings are tilted up a little bit more. They're running much more downforce in the Penske car. But also the strategy of the teams as to whether to run the cars as a road race car or as an oval car. And what I mean by that, certainly the suspension settings are meant to just go left, the cambers, the toes. But some of the cars are running spools. That is, the rear wheels are locked together. They run a slightly larger right rear tire than a left rear tire to help the car arc through the corners. Other teams have decided to run an open differential to help with braking and also with the balance of the car mid-corner. Now, the teams have been split almost 50-50 up until the race. Now it's favoring the oval setup with a locked left and right rear wheel. But I can tell you, amongst the front runners, it's split almost evenly. I just can't tell you which ones are which.
Franchitti coming up on Fittipaldi now. Give you an idea of the interval back through the remainder of the field. Marquez still locked in his battle with Greg Moore. Alex Barron brings the eagle in and climbs out of the car. So Pruitt, Helio Castroneves, Michael Andretti, Jimmy Vasser, and now Alex Barron out of the run. 60 laps complete. 108 the scheduled distance, 48 to go.
Right now, Paul, in the battle of the engines, it's Honda, Cosworth, Honda, Mercedes in the top 5. Honda's very strong in practice and qualifying here, but the Fords, without a doubt, have a lot of top-end horsepower, and they seem to work very well when coupled with that Swift chassis, as we see by Christian Fittipaldi and P.J. Jones, who's currently in 6th position. We can see so far Hondas have led all but that first lap that Christian Fittipaldi had.
That lap, of course, came under caution, and the domination as we watch Gugelman stop, and this is unscheduled as well. The domination by Montoya, sure racking those numbers up for Reinhardt, for Honda, and for Firestone. CART made an announcement here this weekend that they are going to require their teams when they appear at St. Louis in 2 weeks to have a Kevlar tether attached to the front hub carrier in the front of the chassis to try to keep the wheels from coming off of the car during an impact with the wall and bouncing around, throwing debris around. That's the same rule that Formula One started the year with. and they simply picked up the FIA wording on that rule, but they made it only applicable to the front of the car. Point was made that they don't remember a time when the rear tire and wheel and hub carrier assembly came off and got outside of the racetrack.
Very important safety step, especially with the high speeds that these cars can obtain, of trying to keep the parts centered around the car so that they don't deflect into any drivers or back to the infield or the outfield. A very, very good step by the people at CART.
Horacio Guzman retires his car as well, so we're seeing some interesting retirements with some of the key players in the series. You got a glimpse too. Gary Gerould is right there, so I assume we'll have a report shortly. Montoya continues his dominance of this race and of the series. We're back at the CART Rio 200 Paul Page with Parker Johnstone. Nothing has changed. Montoya continues to be the leader. About a second behind him, that black car, that's Christian Fittipaldi, the pole sitter, his first pole of his career. And the crowd went nuts when that occurred. Of course, it's a very partisan crowd. They love their Brazilian drivers, and the Brazilian drivers have been doing so well in the CART FedEx Championship Series. So Montoya, Fittipaldi, Franchitti, Kanaan, Carpentier, the top 5. Followed by Jones, Max Papis, Tarso Marquez, Moore, and Cristiano Domata now moves into the top 10. Let's go to Gary Gerould.
Mauricio, what happened?
We probably have a water leak. The temperature was climbing very high, was up to 110, so we decided to stop before we blow on the engine.
Very tough weekend for you. You had problems with qualifying yesterday relating to the pop-off valve. Was the valve working okay today?
Yeah, the valve was fine today. The car was handling well. It's just once the temperature starts climbing, you lose so much power that there is no point to stay out there, especially here with those long straights. You need all the power that you can get.
I see a lot of things being kicked up in terms of dirt and debris. Does it really get all over your helmet? Does it impair your visibility at all?
Oh, it's the same as sandblast. It's just that we had a lot of rain. We hardly run on the circuit, so we're getting a lot of dust.
We're going to take a look down here at his helmet, and maybe you can see what we're talking about, guys, if they can pop the picture back. But there's some of the debris.
His helmet was brand new before this race.
Brand new before this race, and he didn't even get to run the whole day.
And Gary, when you're talking about overheating, that is the same problem that has knocked out Alex Barron. So we thought maybe a couple isolated incidents of overheating, but now it's a trend because we hear that Cristiano Domata also has overheating problems. So with these changing temperatures and the humidity, it appears today as though a lot of guys having problems cooling the engine.
On high humidity, it makes it a greater problem. You really want to open up those coolers as much as you can. On Guzman's car, they wanted to open it up so desperately that they literally ripped a panel loose on the exit to the coolers on the right side.
And you have to remember, Paul, these guys have just not gotten very much track time this weekend. And so for the teams to try to adjust the cooling shutters that they have on the car, you've got to remember, if they remove those shutters and increase the airflow through the radiators, they lose downforce. So they're trying to run as much shutter as possible to run the engine temperature as close to the limit as possible. And if it gets a little more humid than they had predicted, those engines overheat. Once they overheat, you can't bring them back. They lose power, and you're out of the race.
And Parker, what they are doing at the moment to try and combat that is they're running the cars richer. A lot of the teams are telling their drivers, we need to run more fuel, because if you run more fuel, it makes the engine run cooler.
The fuel being methanol, the more you dump in the cylinder, it actually is a cooling agent.
Just like an airplane, Paul, the richer you run it, the cooler it runs. And that's what they're doing. So they'll sacrifice some fuel mileage. They'll also get better power settings that way, because these guys have to get to about lap 72. If they get to lap 72, they can make it to the end. They should be well within that fuel window for the final stop. So right now, fuel consideration isn't a problem.
And Parker, we have found out that there are 2 guys now that will not have to stop again. And that would be Al Unser Jr. and Paul Tracy. Everyone else will have to come on pit road.
And they came out of the sequence. Carpentier is the first of the leaders in. He peeled off. You saw him now into the pits.
Paul, we're here watching for routine service for Carpentier. We'll see if they make any change. Yes, indeed. A couple of big turns on the left side, about a half turn on the right side. Fueling complete. He's rolling. We've got him out of here in 13 and fraction seconds.
Came on the 70th lap, though, Gary. Now I wonder the question, is that just a little bit too early, or whether or not they think they can go the whole way, especially if everybody's starting to ritch the cars out.
It's going to be very, very close for them. I think most of the other front runners are figuring they can get another 3 laps or so before we see them, including Juan Montoya.
Marquez hits the pits. This is the 71st lap. Looks like this is going to run, especially if everyone is suffering the same problem and having to put more fuel in the engine to keep it cool, like it's going to be awfully close on the finish.
It's going to be very, very close, Paul. That's a great view, though, of the low downforce setup on the pits. You can see the rear wings nearly flat. When we were watching Patrick stop, you could see all the kickers on the front of the wings and how far the front wings were turned up. Gives you a little insight into the strategy these teams are running.
Leaders of the race now having to overhaul some of the slower cars in the field. Kanaan comes out of the top of the order, makes his stop. This is the 72nd lap. And as we watch this, let's go back and think about what we saw on Mauricio Guzman's helmet, where he had the tearaways on the faceplate of his helmet. He was fine. There was no sandblasting, but all around that, included on the visor, a lot of sandblasting. Now let's think about Montoya, who is due into the pits now. In fact, he's on the road. And they do have that whole consideration with trying to get a new tearaway on there, and then only one. Gary Gerould?
Oh, that'll be the key thing we'll watch. We don't anticipate any other changes, just tire and fuel as routine. But watch now, there goes the pole. Montoya hasn't made a reach. Now he pulls it off the pole. No, he says no, he's not even going to try it. Apparently he likes it the way it is. Doesn't want to be bothered with the tape. He just threw the tear off and he's rolling. 12.5 seconds or a fraction under.
The leaders last pitted of the 31st lap, so this is a 40-lap run that they've just completed as Christian Fittipaldi comes in. But that 40-lap run included 14 laps of yellow. Christian Fittipaldi in toward Jan Vikas.
Yes, and of course we heard 12.5 for Montoya, so we'll put the watch on this and see if the Newman Haas boys can beat that. They're not going to make any changes on the car this particular stop. Off to Jackson 10, but they're waiting for fuel. Oh, not too good. 13.2.
Fittipaldi rolls back. Dario Franchitti, who stopped first, assumes the lead of the race. Max Pappas currently scored in second, followed by Jones and Moore. The crowd cheers as the cars roll out of the pits, and Franchitti takes over the lead here at the Kart Rio 200. We'll be back with more right after this. Back at Rio, where the Brazilian crowd is cheering for Christian Fittipaldi, who is now locked in a battle with Juan Montoya. And they have been on their feet constantly. Franchitti came off of the lead into the pits. Al Unser Jr., who stopped out of order and does not have to stop again. This could be critical for him. And there you go, Montoya darts to the inside. Unbelievable.
Well, Paul, Christian Fittipaldi came out of the pits just in front of Montoya, but Montoya had a lap of heat in his tires. He pushed Christian very, very hard. Christian wasn't able to hold on to it going into turn 4, and Juan Montoya got by.
So Montoya on the roll through the field now. Jan Vikas.
Well, we saw that Christian Fittipaldi did not make as fast of a pit stop as what we saw for Juan Montoya. And when you think about that, well, how could he get out in front of him? It's just what Parker was talking about. The first 2 or 3 laps you run on those cold tires takes longer. So even though he got out ahead of him, he didn't have the grip that he needed. Montoya then had hot tires, and he was a sitting duck.
And you saw Fittipaldi in the replay of the pass got way up into the gray stuff. The cold tires just simply not working for him.
He was fortunate not to get into the wall, Paul, because when you get off the groove that high, it's very easy to get into the marbles, and it just sucks you right out into the tires. He was fortunate to keep control of that, but as a result, he's now lost second place as well as Franchitti slipped by.
So Fittipaldi certainly hoping that those tires will come up to temperature as fast as they can. They should be up to full temperature now, but Franchitti certainly worked on him hard. Robbie Gordon. Brian Herta with Kanaan all over the back of his car as well.
on board with Tony Kanaan. You can see him reach down, shift up to 4th, 5th, and 6th gear, pulling over 15,000 RPM. And Paul, I think this is going to turn into a real fuel strategy race. If in fact, Al Unser Jr. and Paul Tracy can get to the end without another fuel stop, that will really change the complexity of the first 2/3 of this event. But how much will they have to conserve? Well, we know that Montoya, Franchitti, and Fittipaldi are on full rich, full power. How fast can they run them down? Well, we'll see.
3 cars, Tarso Marquez, currently down at 13th place. Remember his teammate Al Unser Jr. stopping out of order. That giving him the advantage on the last set of stops.
And guys, of course, what would make the major difference here is if for some reason they had a yellow flag before Montoya was able to close that gap, that would make a big difference when it comes to how much fuel you're going to save, what Parker is talking about. If you get some yellow, then for the guys like Al Unser Jr., Paul Tracy, then it's not an issue how much fuel they use.
Well, I just think at this point, Paul, that they're either going to have to run extremely conservatively or they'll have to make a splash and go at the very end.
And Parker, I think we lost another Toyota. Cristiano D'Amata came by the front straightaway. It sounded sick, just like we heard from Scott Pruitt. I think you'll see him on pit road next time around.
Like Brazilian television was having some problems separating the car of Al Unser Jr. and the nearly identical car of Tarso Marquez. Unser Jr., of course, in the front of the field owing to that stop. Paul Tracy with the stops has come up into second. Robbie Gordon now sits in 3rd place. Remember, Robbie's right out of here and heading up toward Indianapolis, where he's also entered in the Indy 500. And that coverage, of course, will come to you on ABC Sports.
What a great turnaround of events for Robbie Gordon, Paul. He had an accident on Friday with Paul Tracy. Heavy damage to his Swift. They brought a Renard. It's their only backup car, but they got the Swift repaired. He missed qualifying. Started in 26th place, and now he's all the way up to 3rd. And here's Cristiano D'Amata with the engine problem that Jan was talking about.
Jan Bikas?
Yeah, we heard it go by. We don't see as much smoke as what we saw for Scott Pruitt, but I would imagine, as we sit, yeah, Cristiano D'Amata is getting out of the car. It appears as though this overheating problem is pretty widespread, and it has definitely affected the Toyotas in particular.
Cristiano D'Amata was 5th in the practice the other day, Paul. Great run for that Arcero Wells MCI WorldCom team for this young Brazilian with the Toyota motor. And now his day's over as well. I think heat is affecting a lot more than we know. We know that some of the engine manufacturers have a much greater tolerance for overtemp. I know that the Hondas do, but obviously the Toyotas at this point don't. And they've shown great reliability up until this weekend throughout the first 4 races of this year. A real shame for that team. Also for Alex Barron at Dan Gurney's All-American Eagle team.
With 83 laps complete, 25 to go, Al Unser Jr. leads it. What a week. If he can continue there, this turns out to be for Penske.
Yellow.
Yellow comes out. Yellow comes out, the field slows.
Well, this is exactly what they needed, Paul. Al Unser Jr., Paul Tracy, Robbie Gordon, this is exactly what they wanted, and they got it in spades.
4th yellow of the day with 24 to go. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the great week that Penske Racing has had that may get better. We'll be back after these messages and a word from our ABC stations. Second overhead today is the Spirit of the Americas, the Goodyear blimp. It's based right here in Rio. It's one of 7 Goodyear blimps around the world. And you saw from the blimp a moment ago, Paul Tracy surging forward on Al Unser Jr., trying to get him to head on into the pits a little bit faster if he can. Both 1st and 2nd place and probably 3rd place Robbie Gordon expected in this time around, even though Al Unser's crew did report out earlier that they were fine to the end of the run. Didn't make really great sense when you considered how much of the race was left to run. So the battle goes once again to the pit crews.
And Paul, I should clarify that. I think that was miscommunication on my part. what Penske was telling Al Jr. on the radio as he approaches here for his pit stop was that everyone would have to stop before him. They did know that they were going to have to stop one more time, and so I believe that was my error there. They knew they wanted to come in now, and this yellow has they're furious down here, and a nice stop for Al Jr.
Junior in and out, 21 laps to go under the caution, watching for Paul Tracy. Al Unser Jr. comes out ahead of Paul Tracy. Robbie Gordon's running for the line too. Let's see if he gets out. He's alongside Tracy as they come out the pit road, and Robbie Gordon comes out in second place. Tracy goes back to third. There they are. That's Gordon as they came off the line. You got a glimpse of Al Unser Jr. as he headed around the corner. So a big change on the pit stop there.
Well, and that's why the teamwork is so important, and we saw what happened in the pit lane almost as what happened a few days ago. They were in that exact same position, but down at the opposite end of the track when they came together. A great move by this young team Gordon, getting their driver out of the pits in front of Paul Tracy.
No official reason for the yellow on this, though this may be the reason, Gary Gerould.
Adrian Fernandez, did you make contact with the wall?
Yeah, I got a little bit loose out of four, and you know, I just couldn't get it back, and I just brushed the wall in the exit.
Enough damage, obviously, to put you out to get into the suspension?
Yeah, we damaged the right front suspension and wishbone, and it was a shame. But, you know, we had some problems also with the brakes. My brakes were really low. I had to pump them out every time I was going into a corner. So, you know, we were having a little bit of trouble also getting out of the pit. So, not a good day for us, but we should be back for St. Louis.
Thanks a lot, Adrian.
Thank you.
So Adrian Fernandez out, and all the excitement of watching some great pit stop work. I want to clarify, that was the battle between that group. Montoya has reassumed the lead, followed by Franchitti and Fittipaldi. Our Toyota Spotlight focuses on the young driving talent coming out of Brazil and excelling in the kart series. Gil de Ferran has made a name for himself in the series, winning twice. Mauricio Guzman captured his only kart victory at Vancouver in 1997. A trio of young drivers is making noise this year, with Tony Kanaan winning the pole at Long Beach, Helio Castroneves taking the second slot on the grid at Nazareth, and last year's Indy Lights champ Cristiano D'Amata driving Toyota to its best ever kart finish with a fourth place at Nazareth. Tony Kanaan in fifth place, one of the two Brazilians in the top five, along with Christian Fittipaldi, four in the top 10, as Marquez in ninth, de Ferran in 10th place. Now, don't forget more motorsports coverage coming up on ESPN, on ESPN2, and of course on ABC Sports as we begin our coverage of Indy Live. ABC Sports will be at Indy for pole qualifying on Saturday, May 22nd, and Bump Day on Sunday, May 23rd, and then, of course, coverage of the Indy 500 Sunday, May 30th. Tony Kanaan tries to scrub those tires off, get them ready to come back to the green flag. We'll be crossing over the 90th lap of this 108th lap race. Pace picks up. Montoya, Franchitti, Fittipaldi, Pappas, Kanaan, top five. And an indication from some of the observers that there is some moisture in the area. I guess that means rain, and the yellow flag and the course condition flag comes out. So rain, which was a concern, is a factor. Look at Tony Kanaan's onboard camera and the moisture right on the front of it. Rain is supposedly over in the third turn. They're heading into the first turn now. Big course like this, you often get that.
Hey, Paul, here's a crazy idea. What if it were to rain and they had to stop it? You're past halfway. If you were one of those three guys that just pitted, could you just run around real slow and save fuel and hope it rains a lot?
Got to be the roughest decision of a chief steward, especially when you close in these laps. And we'll just say that's what I'm sure Wally Dallenbach gets an incredible salary for. And he hears me say that. He's going to be coming through this door. Now, that is a tough decision. You think about it. You've just had that line of stops completed. You have 18 laps left to go in the race. You have guys that certainly think they're capable. You can stop the race and wait. You can stop the race entirely depending on how good you think the information on the weather is. And, of course, you're in a tropical area here. Rain showers can be tiny. They can move through. Another one can be on top of you right away. A lot of humidity here we've already mentioned. That slows the track time. A lot of factors involved in that kind of decision making. Now we're going to show you the full field summary here, with Montoya still the dominant factor in this race. Well, Dario Franchitti has certainly been there in the fight, and a great run thus far for the pole sitter, Christian Fittipaldi.
Paul, you talk about the focus of these drivers as you go through the full field rundown. Patrick Carpentier a lap ago radioed to his crew and said, are we at the halfway point of this race yet? Remember, it used to be a much longer race in earlier years. It's a sprint this year at 200 miles, basically. The answer came back, well, in fact, there are just 8 laps to go.
You know, one of the interesting aspects, too, of what they do here for this race, there are, of course, other competitors on the course during the course of the weekend. One thing they do when the champ cars come out is change the deceleration signs leading into the corners, you know, the yardage markers. Now, we tend to use it as feet. So what is a 300-foot mark, which happens to also be the blend line out of the pits, when the Brazilian series will come out, they will change it and make it the 100-meter marker into the corner. Well, it's pretty close, off by about 2.5 feet, I guess it is. P.J. Jones works the car around. We anticipate the green flag to come back very, very shortly. We're going to send you away. We'll be back with more from the CART Rio 200 right after this. Paul Page with Parker Johnstone back at the Rio 200, the Emerson Fittipaldi Speedway. The sign 1 lap to go until they're ready to come back green. They'll go back green on the 94th lap of the run. A little rain shower just passed through. The sun came out almost immediately, and just that quickly the track was dry.
Paul, this track is so long, and we've seen it several times already this weekend. It can be raining at one end and dry on the other. Wally Dallenbach, the chief steward, doesn't want to take any chances. Now, on a road course, it usually takes quite a bit of visible moisture on your helmet through your visor before you have to be concerned about really slowing down and paying close attention. But this being an oval, the guy's running right on the ragged edge through both corners through turns 1 and 4. There is no room for error. This track, he's got to shut it down, go yellow, and wait until the track observers say that it's safe to go back to green.
And with that great three-way battle coming out of the pits, Gordon, Al Unser Jr., Paul Tracy, Max Pappas was the one who picked up the advantage of that, now sits in 4th place behind Christian Fittipaldi. Tony Kanaan is in 5th.
Couple of messages from Chip Ganassi to Juan Montoya. Stay off the paint in the corners. Be very careful behind the pace car. Be nice and smooth as we anticipate green.
And we will be with you all the way to the checkered flag now as Juan Montoya. Can he do it again? He has been incredible this season. A victory at Nazareth. Boy, humidity so much it looked like just a small contrail coming off the rear wing there of Montoya's car. Everybody else comes down trying to get out of some of the dirt. Move back in the field. Pappas on the charge with Fittipaldi. Kanaan closes too. Kanaan comes to the inside of Pappas. P.J. Jones, he has Carpentier just ahead. Fittipaldi was able to hold off the charge of Pappas. Here he comes again.
Max gained those spots, Paul, because the Miller Lite Rahal team did a great job. He got around Kanaan, Carpentier, and P.J. Jones in the pits.
Carpentier tries to move on Kanaan down the inside on the front stretch. They come hammering down into the corner. Carpentier ducks back in, picks up the toe, tries to stay alongside, can't do it. P.J. Jones just behind him. This is the look back from Tony Kanaan, 5th place. That's Carpentier.
And I can tell you, Paul, both these drivers are using maximum power. They were both on the overtake button to get the most out of those engines, and Tony out-dragged them down to the corner.
Yellow comes out again. And the pace truck begins to roll. Again, no incident on the course. There's no obvious incident. There is a report that Robbie Gordon may have gotten in trouble. Kart safety vehicles did roll, so that would confirm the report. At least the car was in trouble, and it's not a course condition. 5th yellow of the day. One of the safety vehicles, well, there it is, has come to a rest just off of turn 1 on the exit. 97 laps complete. A day that has been somewhat disjointed. Bursts of great speed and action, and then a yellow, a little rain, some incidents. The view down from the blimp there is Chip Ganassi, the owner of Montoya's car. And now they are reporting that Michel Jourdain Jr. and Robbie Gordon did in fact get together. Obviously both continued on. And Montoya becomes the leader once again under the yellow. Host broadcaster here, SBT, Brazilian television. And a very partisan Brazilian crowd just cheering on and on for every Brazilian driver. They are great race fans here in Brazil. Look at them all on their feet in the yellow.
I think they've been on their feet all day, Paul. I remember Helio Castroneves when he climbed out of his Hogan racing car. His pit's located directly across from us. The crowd went nuts. He waved, and they cheered, and that was just getting out of the car.
Public address announcers here have also had a field day with this thing. And the crowd very reactive to them. They do love their motorsports here. Jan Beekes, here comes Robbie Gordon in.
Yeah, well, you talked about the contact. We're overlooking the car here to try and see if there's any damage. They're going to go with 4 tires. And, of course, what they will do is they will check the suspension to see if there's any damage. So, just tires for Robbie Gordon.
So with 98 complete and just 10 to go. I'll show you the field summary. Robbie Gordon rejoins that field. Montoya. Franchitti is there. Remember the lessons he may in fact have learned at Long Beach. He's seen this guy go back to green a couple of times. And on this kind of a track, the ability to drop back and surge a little forward could make a world of difference for Franchitti, I would think.
Well, it really could. And I've watched Montoya these last few starts because he's gotten a chance to practice a lot of them. And he's changing his strategy on every restart. Sometimes he lays back longer, sometimes he goes sooner. But Dario's starting to figure this out. He's not letting Juan get away the way we saw him get away from him at Long Beach. And certainly today, he's starting to get closer and closer, figuring out Montoya's strategies on these restarts.
The top 10, most of them right together on the race course when we come back to green, when we do that. Morris Nunn, the chief engineer for both Montoya and Jimmy Vasser, sits alongside Chip Ganassi.
Paul, we're going to get a word here with Chip. He's handled the restarts masterfully. You got any more magic left in the bag of tricks?
Well, you know, Gary, there's 8 or 9 laps to go or something. We just want to make sure we get to the finish here. Anything can happen these crazy races. You know, in the end, we got a lot of race to go.
How impressed have you been by what this young man has accomplished leading up to this race, only his 5th in Champ Car history?
Somebody came up to me this weekend in Brazil here and said he was the next Senna. And maybe they're not wrong.
High praise indeed.
Well, what they're trying to do here, Paul, is Juan's strategy is pretty easy. He wants to hoodwink Franchitti. He wants to try to bob and weave, get Franchitti to warm up his tires, come off and on the throttle, warm up the brakes, and try to get him out of sequence so that he can get a jump. Now, Franchitti's job is twofold. He's trying to stay with Montoya, but he's trying to get a break to Fittipaldi and so all the way back. So what the guys are trying to do is not lose contact with the guys in front, because obviously they want to pass and move forward, but at the same time they're trying to lose the guys behind them so they've got a clean run through turn 1. For Montoya, it's relatively simple. It gets more complicated as you go back through the field.
Yeah, there are a lot of hungry guys right behind him, and there's another factor that adds to this. There are only 4 cars out there that are not on the leader lap. So almost everybody together is running right together on the track. So as you look down that line, they're all a battle.
And it's all for position, as you said, all the way down, especially when you get into the points-paying position. But this is more than points. We've got some drivers. Christian obviously looking for his first win. Would be great to do it here in Brazil. Max Pappas, another very strong run. Top 5 for Tony Kanaan would be great. And Patrick Carpentier in 6th place, trying to turn his luck around for the 1999 season.
Well, you've had the strategy from the Chip Ganassi team. What about over at Cool Team Green, Jan?
Well, that would be Kim Green that would make those decisions and talk to Dario on the radio. We heard from Chip Ganassi. We tried to find out what was going to happen on the restart. What is your strategy?
What did Chip tell you, first of all? Then I'll tell you ours. No, obviously we're going to give it a go. We've been saving fuel as much as possible all day, hanging in there. And we've got one slight problem where we have lost our shift without lift, which makes it a bit more difficult for Dario. He's very happy with the race car, so we're going to have a go as soon as it goes green and see if we can't get by the number 4 car.
So the main problem with the shift without lift missing is just the time down the straightaway. Do you lose a lot?
Well, he feels it's a bit of a disadvantage, and I think it certainly has shown previously that it could be, but we're confident he's a very good driver and he can get it done.
All right, should be fun to watch. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, Paul, what he's talking about there is that these guys are upshifting 6 times a lap, and normally they hold their foot full down to the floor, and as they pull on the shift lever, there's an electronic sensor that detects that they're upshifting, cuts the motor for just an instant, and then re-engages at exactly the right moment. So when these guys go from 3rd to 4th to 5th to 6th, it's all done electronically other than the pull on the shift lever. What Dario has to do now is the traditional lift, wait for just a moment, and snick the next higher gear. Now, they're not using the clutch in either instant, but it will cost just a little bit of time because of those lifts as he's up changing.
You saw the kart safety team out on the approach to turn 1. They were working on one of the distance marker signs leading into that corner. They've got it fixed. And they're rushing to station, trying to get tucked back in just ahead of the pace truck. And hopefully they will get the lights out on that truck and be able to acknowledge that 1 lap to go back to green. They will go back to green with just 6 laps to go.
Well, this is the most important restart of the entire race because it's a flat-out Saturday night main event right to the end, and it literally is a Saturday night main event here in Rio. Juan Montoya trying to figure out, now that the pace car lights are off, he's got to try to get Franchitti out of sequence, Paul, and really do the best start of the day so that Franchitti won't challenge him going down into turn 1, because that might be Dario's one and only chance to take a look at the lead in this race.
And remember, too, how critical turn 1 is. Hard acceleration up to 200 miles an hour on a normal lap. Not that far from it on a lap like this. Montoya already starts, pulls away, but keep an eye behind him. Franchitti not respond at the same time Montoya did. And he's not looking for momentum into 1. Montoya is heading into 1 now. Here comes Fittipaldi as he tries his move, and he doesn't have enough to do it either.
Montoya did it again, Paul. He out-snookered the rest of the field, and all of a sudden Dario, instead of being on the offensive, had to be defensive going down into turn 1. But Dario is fantastic on the brakes. He kept Christian from getting around the inside, and now they've strung out again. Every guy doing whatever he can, getting that car as neutral as possible to make that last final run to the checkered flag.
Montoya pulls out a second on the field. The battle is back in second place. Franchitti, Fittipaldi. Max Pappas is close by as well. Franchitti now pulls out a bit from Fittipaldi.
I mentioned earlier on the steering wheel they have an overtake button which gives them maximum RPMs, maximum power. I guarantee these guys are just holding that button in all the way around the circuit to make sure that they've got everything they can get out of their power plants. They've got their heads as low as possible, trying to get every bit of speed to keep in the draft and try to catch the guy in front of them.
On the backstretch, you got a good look up the field. Nothing has changed there. No one in challenge right now. Focus of the battle is here at second place because Montoya looks like he may do it again.
What we saw at Long Beach and Nazareth is that once Montoya pulls out this gap, he actually starts driving a little more conservatively and is still able to extend his lead. Mentally, he's very, very tough. He's 23 years old, obviously great car control, great talent, but mentally he's superb, and he's doing it once again.
Max Pappas may be on his way to his best career finish. Previous best was 5th. He's in 4th now.
Montoya mentioned at the beginning of the show that he hoped to win a couple of races this year. Never really thinking about the championship, but he thought if he did well this weekend, his mind might start turning towards championship considerations. And Paul, I think he better start thinking about it right now because it looks like he's got first place in the championship 5 races into the season locked up.
Richie Hearn into the pits and out of the run.
Paul, the situation there with Richie Hearn, it's the same thing that we've seen with the other Toyota power plants. It overheated.
Well, the high humidity here in Rio has very definitely been a factor here today. Most of those being listed out as a turbocharger failure.
Whoa! Big wiggle coming off of turn 4, Paul. I may have said he was driving conservatively, but not slowly. We saw him right on the ragged edge, 900 horsepower through those Firestone tires. What a great save coming off the corner, and he's not showing any signs of letting up.
Again, the back end jumps just a little bit. Montoya on the backstretch.
and he's the only car to get into the 38-second bracket, Paul. He's at 38.9, Franchitti down to 39 flat. Montoya extending his lead, driving the fastest laps of the race right at the very end.
P.J. Jones, while we're watching the leader, almost all the way through the dirt as he comes down to overhaul Patrick Carpentier. White flag. Final lap for Juan Montoya. Darts off in the corner. Franchitti can't catch him. Franchitti will remain unchallenged as well. There comes Franchitti onto the back stretch. Now Fittipaldi onto the back. An incredible accomplishment by this rookie driving for Chip Ganassi. Montoya, who'd never raced a big car on an oval before, then scores and scores again. And look at the team. The checkered flag, the victory, goes to Montoya. He continues his lead in the championship points at Chip Ganassi. The celebration begins. Though Jimmy Vasser was out early in kind of an unprecedented situation for that team who never has mechanical failures. Franchitti in second, Fittipaldi third, Pappas, Kanaan. That's the way they finish. Juan Montoya becomes the first rookie to win 3 straight as he takes the win in the CART Rio 200. 23 cars on the leader lap at the finish. Now let's send you down to winner's circle. Here is Gary Gerould.
He comes out of the car. Juan Montoya, you have won your 3rd consecutive race. What were the concerns for this one today?
I think it was a bit of fuel and everyone. Beautiful. But I think everyone was in the same position. I think it was good. I had a good start. The brake just too early. I knew how deep I could brake, and I just went there, and that was beautiful. I think it really helped, for me, for Target. Another win for the Target. Now we're going to the Target house on Monday to open that house, and it just helps so much.
Tell me about the restarts for a man who doesn't have much oval track experience. It seems like you've handled them flawlessly, event after event. Now, are you really comfortable now in these ovals?
Yeah, I like it. I enjoy it a lot. I like this oval. I enjoy so much being here in Rio. Just the fans and everything. Just Emerson did a great job as well.
You lost your tear-offs early. There was an opportunity to put one over your helmet, but you decided not to. Why?
It was too complicated, and my visor was clean because I was running in front, so I was expecting to stay there anyway.
Did you ever think when you started out you could win 3 in a row, let alone 1 or 2 in your rookie season?
Not really, but the things are coming on great. I think Chip did a great job for me, Target, all the people here, all my guys did an excellent pit stop, so we're okay.
Number 1 in points and starting to run away.
Dario, how much of a factor was it for you on that restart, the shifting problem you were having?
Yeah, it was fairly major because when I wanted to go in I couldn't use first because I had to make another shift then. It was a bulky shift, so I was using second, so one was getting the initial jump on me. And then from that point onwards, it was just, every time I lifted, you could see him getting further and further away. So it hurt us quite a lot today. I think the start was the thing that really hurt us because one had Christian to tow past, but Christian and myself had to brake there. So I think from the start, we were really up against it. Track position was very important today because everybody's running the car so trimmed out. But great pit stop, great first pit stop by the guys at Team Cool Green. But we didn't have it today. Take second, but I'm pretty disappointed with the way things were going out there.
Montoya extends his points lead by 5th. Dario Franchitti run moves from 5th in the points to 2nd, and Christian Fittipaldi from 6th to 3rd. So they both did very well. Next stop, of course, cars of the CART FedEx Championship Series. Motorola 300 on May 29th. We'll have coverage right here on ABC Sports. Can Juan Montoya make it 4 in a row? And of course, for any information on any form of racing, ABC Sports is online at ESPN.com, part of the Go Network. I'm Paul Page for Parker Johnstone, Jan Beekes, and Gary Gerould. We've had a great time in Rio. See you in 2 weeks.